Hi guys, welcome to Hadoop Tutorials. In this video I'll show you how you can use Spark as an execution engine for Hive. In previous video I showed you how you can install Hive and Spark, and in this video I'm going to walk you through how you can use Spark as an execution engine for Hive. The first requirement is to have Hadoop, Hive running, Hive and also Spark running on your Google Cloud machine or virtual machine, whichever you are using. So just make sure they are up and running. I know a lot of people are having issue using Spark as an execution engine for Hive. It comes with the default execution engine as MapReduce, and there are some instructions on how to use Spark as an execution engine. But I think some of the steps are kind of tricky, and a lot of people don't get it. So number one is you make sure that Hive and Spark versions, they are compatible with each other. If you see this link, I have opened it here. So this is the standard wiki page from Apache site, and on this page you can see which version of Hive is compatible with what version of Spark, and it's very important that you follow these versions, otherwise you will run into a lot of errors and issues. So in my case, I know I installed latest Hive version, which is 3.1.4, and as per this document, the compatible version is 2.3.0, which is for Spark, and that's what I installed in my previous video, if you remember. So I already have compatible versions on my machine. So what I'm going to do is I'll follow some of the steps that I have prepared here, and you can probably follow along. So I have my master node running here, and it's a good idea to install Spark on master node rather than on data node or nodes with lower memory or lower CPU. So master node is the better place, but if you are running out of memory or out of CPUs, then you can install it on the data node as well, but just you have to set up the configuration accordingly. Now to get started with with the configuration of Hive, first thing, we need to make sure that all these environment variables, they are set in your bashrc file. If we did these steps and we have set all these environment variables when we were installing Spark and Hive, so it should already be there. For my setup, I will just double confirm. So if you look at bashrc file, we should see those variables. So all of these variables are already set for me. So I have Java home, Hadoop home, Hive home, Spark home, and then the Spark master web URL and the port set already over here. So for me, I don't need to do or set up any of these variables. So I'll go with the next step. So the next step is to go into the lib folder of Hive home, and we have to link some of the Spark jars over here. So let's go ahead and do that. And as you can see, this is like the built-in jar files that comes with Hive. So I'm going to link all these library, core, and then network jar files for Spark. Right, so this is linked. We can just double check if they are there. So you can see these different color for the linked files, right? But they act like local jar files. So those files are linked. Now the next step is we have to go into the Hive site .xml, and then we have to set up Spark as an execution engine. So over here, if you don't see the variables or execution engine configuration, that means by default it's using MapReduce. So in this one, what we have to do is we have to add these properties to use Spark as an execution engine. So if I'll just quickly walk through this configuration. So this is for setting up execution engine as Spark. This is for the master master URL for Spark. Right, so we have set it as localhost 7077. If you are running this on a different data node, then you should replace localhost with whatever IP of data node, and then the event log is enabled, is true, and then the event log directory is in the temp folder. So this is your temp directory on local machine, and then Spark serializer, and then the Spark yarn jars. So this is the Hadoop path. Again, because we are running it on master node, we can use localhost, but if you are running from a different data node, then you should set it as the master node IP address. Okay, so I'm going to save this configuration. Let me just double check there is no syntax error. Looks good. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and let's go to the next step, which is to make sure below properties exist in yarn site. So if you look at the yarn site, so let's see if these properties exist. So we have host name, web app address, but we don't have these properties. So I think if you have installed it using different instructions, you might already have this, but if you don't, then you should add it. So I'm going to add this in my configuration because they don't exist. And just keep in mind, these are all the libraries that are coming with Hadoop, and I think Hive or the yarn needs it at the runtime. Especially when using Spark execution engine, if you don't have these in the configuration, you might run into errors. A lot of these configurations I found by trial and error. When I was running into a lot of errors, and somehow after doing some research I found that I need to have this configuration, so that's how I documented it. It might work for you without some of these, because I know different version of Spark and Hive has sometimes they have different steps, but you can follow these steps and see if it works. But these particular versions, Hive version 3 and Spark version 2, as of now these steps are working, but I cannot guarantee the same steps will work for future version or older versions, so just keep that in mind. If you run into errors, you can always post a comment on the website or on the YouTube, and I will try to answer, and we will try to resolve it. Okay, so this is done. I'm going to save this. And then the next step is to remove old version of Hive jars from Spark jars folder. So what happens is in the Spark directory there is a jars folder, and if you look at or just list those files, you will see there are already Spark is coming with some of the Hive jars, built-in Hive jars that has a different version than the one we installed. So I know I have Hive version 3.1.4, and this jar has version 1.2.1, which will be incompatible, and if I don't remove those, I will run into some of the errors. So I'll have to remove them. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all of these jars. Right. Just keep in mind default, the documented way of running Hive with Spark execution engine mentions that you need to compile the Hive. You have to compile Hive without the Spark libraries, or something like that, something along that line. But I found these steps avoids that. You can just use the default Spark bin and then just remove these libraries and it should work. Okay, and then I had these steps, but I have commented it out later because I found they were causing some other issues, so I'm not going to do that. This step especially was copying the Spark jar files in Hadoop Spark jars folder, but this is unnecessary, so I'm going to skip that. I think that's it for the configuration. Now what we can do is we can start Hive, and then we can try inserting a record and see if that works. Okay, so let's try and insert a record in employee table that we created previously. Just show you the content. So this is the content as of now. So let's insert a new record, and this time we should see how you're trying to use Spark as an execution engine. So let's see. So you will still see the MapReduce parameters, but behind the scene it should use Spark as an execution engine. Okay, so there is an error here, so let's check it. As you can see, the error is java.language.number format exception 30s. I did fall into this issue before, and I have documented it here that we will run into this issue. So to solve this error, this is causing because of a newer configuration into HDFS site. I mean the new version of Hadoop, where default value for this parameter client data node restart timeout is 30s. So by default it try to use 30s format, which doesn't work because it has an S. It's only looking for number, so when Hive is trying to execute query, it's only expecting 30 and not 30s. So what we have to do is we have to go into this configuration HDFS site. So you have to get out of Hive first. Okay, let me just clear. Okay, and then we try and edit HDFS site. So as you can see, this property at the moment doesn't exist here, so this is why it's using the default value, which is 30s. So now if you see here, I have set it as 30, and that should solve this issue. Okay, so I'm just going to save this. Okay, so HDFS site is good. Now we can try again. There is another error that we might run into, but let's try this one first. So I'll go back to Hive. And now we can try inserting record again. Okay, so Spark execution has started. When you see outputs like this, that means it's using Spark, right? So you can see its Spark job finished successfully in 12 seconds. First time it might take a little longer, but for the next record it shouldn't take that long. So let's try and insert another record. So the total time was 39 or 40 seconds. Let's try to insert another one. Now this time you can see it's much faster, so it's only taking like 2.8, so that's 3 seconds, right? So I think that's pretty much it. One thing I want to mention here is you might run into this error, semantic exception, failed to get a Spark session. This is a very generalized error for Spark, and if you get this, that means you have some configuration issue. So if you have done, so just double check the configuration we did on the top here, right? And if all of these are fine and you are still running into this error, and then you are probably using a different version of Spark or a different version of Hive that are not either compatible with each other, or maybe one of the steps that is needed for those particular versions is not here. So these steps are really I tested with Hadoop version 3.1.2, then Hive version 3.1.4, and the Spark version 2.3.0. So if you're trying other combination, you might see different errors, and honestly there are a lot of issues that you might fall into. So I mean, if you get different errors or different issues, you can always post comments, and if you found some solutions, then please post them so that others can take benefit from it. So I think that's it for now for Spark. One more thing I wanted to show you is, if you look at the Spark master web UI, we should see all those queries that we executed over there. So if I refresh this page, you can see there is this application that has run Hive on Spark. So this is what we just executed. So if you click on this, under this application there is another worker process, right? Oh, it says running, but it's actually finished. For some reason it still says running, but you can check the standard output or the error log over here. So that's another way of checking what application Spark has run, right? So this running stat is by default. So because we are running Hive at the moment, so this one worker process will use will be used by all the queries that we are running. So this is why it says running. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it for Spark as an execution engine for Hive. Thank you guys.